this recording started. Whoops, let's go back. Just a little housekeeping. You're able to hear through your telephone or you can hear through your computer speakers. Everyone is muted except for our presenters. If you need to, if you'd like to submit a question, we would love to have any questions you might have. You would just type them into the question box, and at the end of the presentation, we will be answering any questions. Excuse me. This call is being recorded, and we will be posting this webinar so that you can go back and look at it if you have some things you want to refresh your memory on, or if you want to share the link with someone that you think would be interested in having some more information on advocacy. So we will send all that out as well as some other information after probably on Tuesday or Wednesday. As I mentioned, I'm Michelle Smith. I'm one of the people that will be talking today. We also have Marissa Rathbone with Active Life, and we have Claudia Rodas with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. I'll let them share a little bit of information on their backgrounds when they start their presentations. So today what we'd like to do is share information about the Partnership for Healthy Texas and what we're working on for the 2013 session, and also share a little bit about obesity and advocacy and some of the things that might be a little bit different than advocating for some other type of issue. We'll walk you through the legislative process, show you how to find your legislators, how to look up bills, and how to track bills. Then we will share an approach to talking and communicating with legislators called hook, line, and sinker, which is a very simple, very direct way to think about how you want to approach a legislator. Then we'd like to share a little more information on how to talk to and communicate through email or through other means, letters, telephone calls, any of the different ways that you can communicate with a legislator. And then hopefully you'll feel comfortable enough to help us advocate for healthy schools. Just quickly, I'm sure most of you, since you are working with school health advisory councils, are aware of the obesity crisis we have in the U.S. and especially in Texas. 1 in 3 Texas children right now are overweight or obese. And interestingly enough, we have the nation's highest obesity rate for girls. It's also not just about an issue of being overweight, it's all the chronic diseases that are caused by obesity. Type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and even cancers can be tracked back to obesity. And the cost is continuing to rise, and it's not just a cost, it's a cost of healthcare, it's a cost to businesses, and every year it continues to climb that we aren't successful in making changes. And one of the saddest comments that's been made for several years now is the fact that today's children are projected to have a lower life expectancy than their parents will because of obesity if we don't fix it. So, who's the Partnership for Healthy Texas? Well, Partnership has been around. This will be our 5th session. We were formed based on a report that came out on the fact that we were having an obesity crisis, and several different organizations helped work on a policy brief, and it was distributed. When the policy brief was distributed, the groups realized that they had all been working independently and that it would be really good if we combined our efforts and worked on legislation that we could all agree on. So the partnership was formed with different groups, and our main goal is to help these groups collaborate on specific policies that can help prevent and reduce obesity. We want to be the go-to group for policymakers. We want to be able to share information about consequences and also statistical information that might help guide them in making decisions. We want to promote evidence-based policies and strategies, not just at the state level, but things that reach down into the community and the family and even individuals. And we want to be a resource for people like yourselves who are working in areas of schools that would be interested in addressing obesity prevention and treatment as well. Our membership is fairly large. This is the membership organizations. We also have individuals, but We have a broad range of groups that all have an interest in helping prevent and excuse me, reduce obesity. Our advisors are state agencies that can't really advocate or lobby, but have a lot of good information that can help us understand the issues we're facing and help guide us in the types of policy decisions we're trying to make. So, for the 83rd legislative priorities, we are building on things that we've done in previous sessions. We're working to improve health in schools through policies that would impact physical activity and nutrition. We're wanting to ensure that the built environment is supportive of physical activity, and we're working with different groups like excuse me, like Bike Texas on things around complete streets and safe routes to school. We want to promote nutrition and fitness in early childhood settings. We also want to increase access to healthy foods in a variety of settings, schools included, and then curb obesity costs. So these are kind of overarching priorities that we have, and we'll look at some of the specific legislation and some of the specific ways that we feel we can target and focus on these individual priorities. So I'm going to turn this over to Marissa, who's going to give you a little bit more background on advocacy and how it relates to obesity. So, Marissa, take it over.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. Appreciate the introduction. Just a little bit about me before I get started. Again, my name is Marissa Rathbone, and I'm the Director of Policy and Programs here at Active Life, which is an Austin-based nonprofit that does statewide outreach to help promote physical activity and nutrition initiatives, programs, and policies, in essence, to make healthy the norm. We know as a culture that healthy has become sort of the expectation, unhealthy has become the expectation. And so what we're trying to do is work with our expert partners, such as the American Cancer Society, the Texas Action for Healthy Kids, through mechanisms like the Partnership for Healthy Texas to help move these initiatives forward. One of the things that I think is important, considering the focus on advocacy for this particular presentation, is that a lot of times we get confused about whether or not advocacy is really effective. And sometimes I believe, and I've even experienced that, what kind of difference do I make? If I send an email to my legislator, is that really going to have any kind of impact? And what can one person really do? And many of you are familiar with the story about the starfish, and that's related to this specific photo here on this page, about how a little girl was walking down the shore, the beach, noticed that all these starfish had been washed up from shore, and she started picking them up one by one and throwing them back into the water, when a passerby told her that, throwing them in one by one isn't going to make a difference. And the little girl stopped for a moment and looked at the starfish in her hand and said, actually, to this starfish, to this one, it will make a difference. And policy functions in a very similar way. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide, Michelle. In that it really is just one person who can make all of the difference in how policies are both moved forward and enacted and then implemented. One person really can make the difference. We call them champions. So we can have advocates who are champions, we can have implementers who are champions, and we can have parents who are champions. You may be all or just one of those things, but we're hoping to make you an advocate by the end of this presentation. You can be an advocate on a variety of different levels. This is the way in our space regarding childhood obesity, where we think about obesity as an individual focus. So we believe that obesity will only be solved when individuals make up their mind to eat right and exercise. So that's the thought, that that's the way to do it on a very micro level. Good programs and policies get too little attention, so we think that nothing works, and too little connection or community to schools, so children live in a family bubble. Advocacy sort of dispels all of these in a way that makes eating right and exercising policies effective, and families able to implement and interact in enacting policies and supporting policies both in schools and in community centers. Go ahead and progress to the next slide, Michelle. So what we hope to show is the environment's role in promoting good policies and good programs. Doctors say that where a child grows up matters in their odds of being obese, and we know that's true. Where kids play and pray and work and go to school, all have an impact on how well or how not well they exercise or eat. And the better they do in school, they're less likely to get in trouble. So all of these elements play an impact, and we believe that all of us play a role in helping to support these environments and strengthen the environments, and policy advocacy is one way to do that. Go ahead and progress to the next slide. So when you approach one of your representatives, so we're going to go into some depth about strategies and how you find your representatives and how you talk to your representatives. But one of the important things to remember is that as a voting member of your community, your representative really represents you. And they are in place because you put them there, and they want to hear from you and what you have to say. It's the role of a representative to help lift up and support the values of their community. So when you approach your representative, in coming into it in a supportive frame of mind, in a positive, proactive frame of mind, you're going to get more from sugar by being supportive and more of a thank you and asking them for their help than maybe blaming them for things that haven't happened. So that's one of the approaches we'd like to talk about, is that you approach any of your representatives in a very positive, proactive way. So in order to improve the health in schools, if that's something that you're passionate about, that you would ask your representative, would you be willing to support requiring school health advisory councils to report to school boards about the school's health progress? Would you be willing to support making physical education and health education a graduation requirement? It doesn't hurt to ask. The answer may be no, and that opens the door for you to ask why and provide information as to maybe why they might change their mind, but you might get a yes. You might find that when you ask them, will you support more complete street projects, roads with sidewalks and bikeways, so they're safe for pedestrians and bicyclists too, you might find a welcome conversation where they say absolutely. In fact, in previous legislative sessions, we've already voted in support of policies like that. We also want to ensure that our legislators are given an opportunity to promote nutrition and fitness in early childhood. These are all priorities of the Partnership for a Healthy Texas as listed here. So will you support having Texas follow the national guidelines for healthy childcare environments? Will you support policies that bring farmers markets and grocery stores to communities and get more fresh produce to schools? And lastly, will you support maintaining funding for current programs that are helping schools lower childhood obesity rates? So all of these questions framed in a positive, will you support, will you be a part of these solutions, are part of the Partnership for a Healthy Texas priorities, and it's a way to communicate with your representatives in a positive, proactive way. And this is just the starting point. Go ahead and progress to the next slide, Michelle. Thank you. So this bill, or this particular slide, simplifies the legislative process in a way that might make more sense than actually if you're right in the middle of it. There are very many steps from when a bill is filed until it becomes a law. And that's why it's so important to be an informed advocate and to work with partners, for instance, the Partnership for a Healthy Texas and other organizations, because we can help you sort of stay in touch with what's happening from day to day, because things change from day to day up at the Capitol during the legislative session that can have a lot of impact on whether or not a bill becomes a law. So typically the way that it works, and you can follow on the House side or the Senate side, but in essence, the way a bill becomes a law is it's first written by a legislative office and filed to become a bill. Prior to that, a variety of things may have already happened, including, and I've actually seen this, heard this, and witnessed, and been a part of this happening, that a constituent or someone who cares about an issue, like those of us who are leading this webinar today, might approach a legislator who has shown some level of interest, or maybe not, just we started a conversation to say, would you support increasing the requirements for health education in school systems? And their answer may have been, yes, we are actually very interested in that. In that case, you might be asked as an expert or as somebody who cares about the issue to help to help provide some support in crafting or creating the law, or be a witness when and if that law actually goes to a hearing. So it's the first conversation that actually helps a bill to become a law. Typically, they're not crafted in isolation, just in an office. It's usually the result of a conversation that happened. So once that bill is introduced to the legislature, go ahead and follow to the left side on the House, the yellow boxes. It begins the House process and is referred to a committee. In our space, most of the bills are either filed to Public Health Committee or Public Education Committee. And they're similar on the Senate side. It's Health and Human Services or Public Education. So one of those two committees are usually where we're going to hear bills about childhood obesity or community involvement in preventing obesity-related diseases. So if it gets referred to a committee and is heard, then it'll come up during one of those committee hearings. And during that time, you have the opportunity, anybody has the opportunity, to walk into the Capitol and register in support or against a bill. And then, in addition to that, may actually be able to provide testimony. So everybody who is facilitating this call has had the opportunity to sit and provide testimony to a group of legislators about a bill that we cared about or were concerned about, one way or the other. If that bill is heard during committee, they will take a committee vote. Maybe not during that exact hearing. They might bring it back to the next one to take a vote. And if the majority votes in favor of the bill's passing, then that bill will go forward to the House floor for debate and a vote. So it goes through the House side first, so it's in a committee, and then it's on the floor for all of the representatives who are on the House side to determine whether or not it will continue on. If it does, then it will go through the same process and up through a conference committee on the other side, the Senate members, when they have a chance to disagree on the content of a particular bill, add to or subtract. And then if it passes both chambers, has the opportunity to then to go to the governor for final authority. At that time, if the bill's made it through all of those steps, the governor has the opportunity to veto the bill or sign the bill to become a law. And that's where all of us then come in to provide support and guidance on the implementation of those laws, whether they're in schools or communities. So that's a good starting point on your legislative process. So what I'd like to show you now, this is a cut and paste slide of a screenshot of the Texas Legislature online. This is your go-to source for learning about how to research bills, find out who your legislator is, and whether or not a bill can become a law. Do I have power? I do have power. Yay. Okay. So in front of you now, you should see the Texas Legislature online website, which is one of my most common websites that I peruse at this point in the year. We'll start with a couple different strategies. What I first want to show you is at the bottom of the screen, the bottom right-hand side, you will see a Who Represents Me section here, where you will enter your home email address, so where you reside, not where you work, but where you live, and you will put that information in and press submit. I'm actually going to, I'll put in my work address. Again, you do need to put your home address for this particular purpose, because that's where you're registered to vote, is from your home address. So I put in my work address, and what it tells me is if I actually lived where I work, then my U.S. senators are Senator John Cornyn and Senator Ted Cruz, and my U.S. representative is Michael McCall. I have my Texas State Senator is Senator Kirk Watson, and my Texas State Representative is Representative Elliot Neistat. So it's pretty great. And then I also have my State Board of Education member down here, Mr. Tom Menard. So what's great about this is that fairly simple, right at your fingertips, you can find out who your representatives are. Even more importantly, what it provides is all of their contact information. And we're going to talk a little bit about strategy and how you approach them on some initial first steps. But if I wanted to find out a little bit about my senator, I could just click on the website that provides his biography and a little bit about his voting history, the things that he's interested in, the areas that are important to him. As you'll see here, education and healthcare are very important to him. That's great. It's very important to me too. So I really want to make sure he knows who I am because I voted, and I may have voted for him. And if I did, I'm happy to tell him so. And in that case, he knows that I'm a voting constituent in his district and probably wants to hear from me. So he knows um, how to vote in my favor, how to represent me as one of his constituents. So I can find his email address, I can find his office telephone number, and a lot of other information related to him. So that's the first step in figuring out who represents you and how to contact them and a little bit about their background if you don't already know. Uh-oh. Can you push the screen back up to me again, Michelle?
I believe you still have this.
Actually, yep, you're right, I do. Thank you. So I apologize for that. So that was back on to the site to find your legislator. So again, this is the Texas Legislature Online. So the web address is, you can Google Texas Legislature Online. You can also put into the address bar www.legis.state.tx.us. Another couple things that we want to show you today, there's a lot that you can learn on here. You could spend hours learning new things about how all of the legislature works, but I want to show you a couple different ways that you can access legislative information. So let's say on a broad scope, you want to find out what bills have been passed this session, or not passed this session, have been filed this session that relate to health. So you will see here that there's a search bar, and you can pick either a bill number or a word phrase. You might not have a bill number memorized, but you might know that there's a bill out there that is dealing with, actually, let's do physical education. We know that there are some bills filed that have addressed physical education in positive ways this session, and we want to know what they are, but we can't remember the number. Just as a point of reference, make sure that it's on 83R, which stands for the 83rd regular legislative session, which was the current legislative session. Type in physical education, press go, and you will find a list of every bill that has been filed during this legislative session that has the words physical education together. So let me show you, this will be good for you to know, one of the bills that the Partnership for Healthy Texas with its partners is tracking and monitoring is a bill by Senator Duell on the removal of fitness assessment as a requirement for physical education. So if you go there, you'll find the author of the bill, then bill number, and then what you're looking at in front of you is the text of the bill, how the bill has been filed. This is, if you don't know how to read legislation yet, it can be a little bit challenging when you're first coming to it. We understand, we've all been there. The words that you're seeing in front of you are part of the Texas Education Code, and they are already law. So if it doesn't have an underline and if it's not crossed out, that means that it's already a requirement of schools in the state of Texas. It's already a law. Where you see that lines are underlined or any sort of words are underlined, that's new potential language. So that's language that has been introduced in this bill as something to change in the existing law. And then if you see something crossed out, then that's something also to be changed, but it's a removal of that prior expectation. So in this particular bill, you'll see that the change is that instead of assessing students in all grades 3 through 12 who are in a physical education class, it would only be students enrolled in grades 3 and 5 and students enrolled in grades 6, 7, or 8 with a grade level assessed to be determined by the district. So that, and then again, students enrolled in grades 9, 10, 11, or 12 with a grade level assessed to be determined with the district. So you might take a look at this bill and think, well, that actually doesn't sound too bad, or that sounds terrible. You might be on one side or the other. just know that the Partnership for Healthy Texas and other supportive organizations, all those organizations on that list, can provide you with information about whether or not how this bill might actually change the law, in which case you might have an opinion that's strong in support or in against, and that's the important time for you to communicate your thoughts to your legislature. So that's one way that you can find a bill. In this case, we looked up physical education. You can also look up a bill by bill number. So if you're interested in finding a bill by a bill number, you can type in HB 1018. So that stands for House Bill 1018. In this case, House Bill 1018 is a supportive bill for school health advisory councils. And in this case, because we looked up a specific bill number, it doesn't give you a list because you'll go directly to the bill itself. One great thing about knowing the bill itself right away, and you could do this with any bill even if you don't know the bill number, is you can get to this page where it'll show you the history of that bill, starting with the most recent step at the top. So if you start down here from the bottom, you'll notice that the bill was filed on February 6th, and then you'll see the chronology of the bill as time went by. It was heard in committee last week, and it was left pending in committee, as is typical with a lot of bills, particularly if not all of the representatives are present to vote, because they have to have a quorum in order to vote on a bill. So it's left pending. It'll probably come back in the next 2 weeks for a final vote. You can also then take a look at what the bill looks like. And if you pull it up, you can pull it up in any sort of text, PDF or Word. And we'll open it up, and then you can take a look at the actual bill itself. So this bill has been supported by quite a few organizations. What it would do is take the existing school health advisory councils, which are a great way to advocate at the local level, and require that they have goals to increase physical activity and improve fitness among students within a campus improvement plan, as well as establish a physical activity and fitness planning subcommittee to address physical activity and fitness and physical education recommendations specifically as a part of the SHAC steps. This bill has changed since it was posted. There's one more change to it, which would require the SHAC to review and make recommendations to the school board about the value, importance, and strategies to enable joint land use agreements as well. So all in all, something positive. If you think so or you don't think so, you can write to your legislator to let them know. So I think for now, unless people have questions towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to cover those two basic points: how you find your representative, and then how you find a bill based on a word or a phrase. We're going to talk in more steps about how you communicate and what sort of strategies you use to communicate to your legislators. And then at some point, some juncture, you might want to come back and take a look at all the other resources on here which allow you to learn more about how bills become laws, how to contact your legislator, follow the status of a bill, and establish the way to follow bill lists, which you can also do through us as we're tracking them for you.
Okay, I'm going to take the screen back, Marissa.
Yes, please do.
Okay, if I can. Let me get my. I think we do have. There we go. One more thing to cover on the TLO. We are
website.
The website. Is my screen
Okay.
tracking bills?
It sure is.
Okay, yeah. So that's just one more option, and we actually have a document we'll send out when we send the link to the webinar that shows you how you can track a bill and the actual process step by step to go through, so that you click on new user and takes you through all the little steps so that you can actually set up your own bill tracking list. So once we provide you with the different bills that Partnership for Healthy Texas is following, you could actually go in and identify these bills and begin your own tracking list. This is another way. I think Marissa was talking about, tracking bills by search by topic. These are just some little screenshots that we have gotten from that document. So it takes you through in that whole process, which is really, really useful, I think, for you guys as you get started. So I'll let Marissa take back over here.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
So I mentioned two bills that are on this list, key bills to follow. You will see a list of them in front of you in no particular order, but what you're looking at is first list of House bills, the number related to that bill, the author, which is in parentheses, so that's the person that authored the bill. Keep in mind that we have several legislators who share last names, not related to each other in all cases. In some cases it is true, but in some cases not, so it's important if you don't find the bill based on a last name, to make sure that you keep looking, because it might be under a different last name. And then the title or the subject matter of the bill. So we have a list here of several that have been filed, and they're at all varying stages right now, and today's April 1st. They're at all varying stages of the legislative process. Some have only been filed and not been heard in any committee. Some of them have been heard in committee. Some of them have been voted out of committee and have made it to the floor. Not many have made it past that point to the other side. So we're still in very early stages of the legislative session. It started in early January and continues through May 27th. May 27th is the scheduled last day. And if a bill hasn't made it through the entire process, not including the governor's signature, it has to make it through all of the House and Senate votes by May 27th. It's basically a goner. We call it dead. So the only good thing about that is that we have seen in many cases that some of our good bills, including this first one, the Childhood Health Program grants, and another one by Nelson that does a similar thing, these were filed in previous sessions and they didn't make it all the way through, or in some cases didn't even make it to a committee, but have come back because they were written and valuable enough to the legislative office to refile in this session with the hopes that it'll get more traction in this session. So you'll see it's fairly intuitive. So we have a bill by Raymond that would provide for childhood health program grants through the Department of State Health Services. So monies would be funneled from the state to the Department of Health Services to support grants that would go to schools. The Obesity Wellness Information Portal is actually a bill that was filed, and the requirement, or what it would enact or enable, was that the Comptroller's Office of Public Accounts would have a website that would collect fitness assessment data and other pertinent data for the public to use and understand obesity and obesity tracking throughout the state. That resource actually already exists. It's on the Comptroller's website. At this point in time, I can't remember the exact name of it, but if you Google obesity prevention or obesity data, Comptroller of Public Accounts, it'll take you there. House Bill 217 would restrict the types of beverages sold on public school campuses, specifically related to sugar-sweetened beverages, so would minimize or eliminate schools the opportunity to sell those types of beverages on campuses. House Bill 275 by Alvarado again would reinstate the physical education credits for high school graduation. So right now 1 credit of physical education is required for high school graduation. That was changed 2 sessions ago. It was previously 1.5 credits of physical education were required for high school graduation, so it's a fairly recent change, and several legislators have been trying to reinstate what was previously taken away. House Bill 276 would require a health credit for high school graduation. This is also to reinstate what previously was required 2 sessions ago, but removed as a high school health requirement. Health education, a half credit was required previously, so basically a semester, which is no longer a state graduation requirement, but many school districts still choose to require, based on local policy, which is another place where y'all can advocate with your school boards through your school health advisory councils, that the health credit be maintained at the local level, which has happened in many cases, but they're trying to reinstate it at the state level, so all schools would be expected to do the same thing. House Bill 277 is a physical activity requirement for students in public schools that expands the existing requirement for middle school students or students who are in grades 6, 7, and 8. Currently are required to have 4 semesters of physical activity. This would require that they have 6, so basically that they would be in physical education at every grade level, grades 6, 7, and 8. And then lastly is the one that I already reviewed with you, House Bill 1018 by Representative Patrick on school health advisory councils. Next slide, please, Michelle. So now we're moving over onto the Senate side and longer titles of bills for no particular reason, just coincidence. So Senate Bill 65 is by Nelson, and this is a partner to Raven's bill on the other side that well, actually, that's not true, and that's related to another one. So this one would provide program recognition to public schools with successful student health and fitness related programs. So it would provide a bronze, silver, and gold level status to school districts who met certain criteria. That criteria is listed in the bill. It includes that they have an active school health advisory council, that they meet the minimum requirements for physical activity at all grade levels, that they assess their student fitness levels and they're using fitness assessment data to drive curriculum and program improvements, so on and so forth. So there's some specific criteria mentioned in the bill, and then also gives the Commissioner of Education the opportunity to add to or change, and not change those requirements, but add to those requirements. And then school districts could submit for recognition and then would be recognized by the Texas Education Agency as a bronze, silver, or gold level school status for health and health education and physical activity. Senate Bill 135 by Nelson increases the graduation. So this is not a direct partner bill to the other side, but essentially does the same as some of Alvarado's on the other side, which would reinstate the health and physical education requirements for high school graduation. So again, moving from just the current 1 credit of physical education required for high school graduation to 1.5 of PE and 1/2 of health. Senate Bill 317 talks about the types of beverages sold on public school campuses. Again, it says it specifically, it's an identical to House Bill 217. We also call those partner bills or companion bills, all the same. It shows that when you have a bill on both sides, the Senate and the House, that there's a strengthened level of support because you have legislators on both sides of the aisle who are supporting a particular piece of legislation, which means the bill has a little bit more of a chance moving forward, because if the House side doesn't like it, the Senate side can pick it up and vice versa. So that's a good sign for this particular piece of proposed legislation, as well as for Senate Bill 525, Rodriguez, relating to physical activity requirements for students in public schools. Senate Bill 1785 by Lucio is related to studies of the Texas School Health Advisory Councils. So it would ask the Texas School Health Advisory Council, which is the state level SHAC, to conduct a study that would address commercial advertisings on public school property. And then Senate Bill 1786 relates to the restriction of certain foods on campus. Okay, I'm ready to move on. So just a little bit, these key bills to follow, some of the ones that the Partnership for Healthy Texas and all the organizations under its umbrella have been following very closely are the following. So House Bill, and these are ones that we as a group have actually registered in opposition to. So when we go to the Capitol, we go online on the House side and register against a bill. And again, some of us have given testimony, but you don't have to. You can still register against. And you can also just send an email or make a phone call that supports all of those same practices. So we are opposed to House Bill 1156, which would eliminate the requirement entirely that school districts assess the physical fitness of students. House Bill 2052 relates to the physical fitness of students by a public school. This would make fitness assessment optional. We're also opposed to that. And then Senate Bill 684, which I reviewed previously, would retract much of the requirement so that it's only specific grade levels instead of grades 3 through 12. And we feel it's important for all students in those grade levels to be assessed, because assessment is part of a quality learning environment, regardless of the subject matter. And currently, it's only physical education classes or their substitutes that are required by law to do the fitness assessment, which we feel is a very reasonable expectation for an educator teaching a subject matter of any kind. Moving on. So I'm actually going to pass the torch back over to Michelle, I believe, and let her take it from here.
And I'm going to share the microphone with Claudia, who's going to take you through some of the steps of communicating and meeting with your legislators. So, Claudia?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, if you want to share a little background, you feel free to.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to be part of this presentation today. I think it's really important to talk about not only about the issues that are being talked about at the Capitol every day, but how all of you who are on the call today can make a difference at the state Capitol. So a little bit about myself. I actually serve as the Field Government Relations Director for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, and I've been with ACS CAN for about 6 years now. ACS CAN is the nation's leading cancer advocacy organization that's working to make cancer issues a national priority. We know that obesity is the second only to tobacco as a leading risk factor for cancer, and that's why ACS CAN has made nutrition and physical activity a top priority. Marissa did a fabulous job right now talking about the priority issues and the importance of being an advocate. She mentioned a few things that I will touch on today in terms of making a phone call and emailing and communicating to your legislator. So in the next few slides, I'm going to touch on some of those few simple ways that what you can do to translate the work that you're doing in your community into the halls of the state capitol. You know, we've all heard about those powerful lobbyists that spend their days at the Capitol persuading members to support or oppose their clients' issues. But all of you too can be powerful, and probably even more powerful than some of those lobbyists. You just need to practice the art of what we call becoming a powerful and persuasive constituent. Legislators monitor the communication that comes in from their constituents. They take the time to know what their constituents are hearing, and especially those who are active in their community. So reinforcing the effectiveness of your letters and emails by following up with some phone calls or personal visits can make a major impact on some of these legislative issues. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you can do to be constant and visible, and to be a constant and visible community leader with your legislator. This slide right here, it says the 7 touches of becoming a powerful and persuasive constituent. In the sales industry, they have what they call the 7 touches of building, the 7 steps or the 7 touches of building a successful relationship. I've even heard of some industries that go all the way up to taking at least 14 touches before you are able to form a trusting relationship with either a client, and in this sense, it would be with your legislator. The concept is the same. You want to make frequent contact to develop strong and trustworthy relationships. There are a few examples here that are listed on the slide, but there are many others that you can do. Bottom line is that you want your legislator to know who you are. You want them to know your name, and you want them to know that you care enough about your community, and you want them to care enough about the issue that you're advocating for. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So there are a variety of ways that you can communicate with your legislator. So today, on this specific slide, or on the next slide, I'll talk about some face-to-face meetings. You're writing a letter or email, and how to make a call. So the first thing to keep in mind, kind of the basic steps of advocacy and persuasion, is you want to know your audience. In this instance, you are dealing with your state legislator. Take some time to do some research and know what committees they serve on. Try to do some research on knowing on whether or not there's any local connections that you may have with that legislator. Get to know them as much as you can. A lot of that information can be found on public websites, whether it's through their state website, it could be their campaign website, or just if they're serving on other boards. So some of the things you want to consider about your target audiences, you want to find things that you think that they find are interesting. or let me take that back, I'm sorry, some of the things that you find interesting may not always be an interest to them. However, there's always some type of connection that you can make to kind of hook them in. You want to identify your audience's key values, and you want to help them to target, you want to help target your message more effectively. And you also want to make it easier to motivate someone based off of one of their established beliefs and convince them of something completely new. So this is why it's important for you to do some research. The second thing you want to do before you communicate to them is develop your message. So once you've identified and done some research on your audience, you want to figure out a good way to message your advocacy issue. Sound advocacy messages are always grounded in data. So you want to talk about the data. You want to talk about you want to speak on the needs and concerns of target audiences. You want to spell out clearly the action you want them to take. Go to the next slide. So this slide is the basic format for a 15-minute face-to-face meeting with an elected official. It's called a hook, line, and sinker. So when you do your hook, this is your introduction. You want to talk about geography, where are you from? You want to make that connection with that elected official to tell them, I live in this specific community or this specific subdivision, so that they know that you are familiar with their district. You want to make sure that you are always in the lead, and you want to tell them where you live and where you work, include any type of street names and town names and so forth. When you go into the line, this is where you as a volunteer want to share your talking points or why you're concerned about the specific issue. So this is why you want to talk about why this issue is important, how it's affected you personally, how it's affected the work that you do on an everyday basis. You want to translate that work that you do and want to share your personal story with that elected official. And then when you go into the sinker, this is the request. You want to first stay on message, and you want to tell them, representative or senator, you want them to specifically support, say, a specific House bill number or specific Senate bill number. So you always want to lead with that type of request. Go ahead and go to the next slide. There are a few other things that you want to remember when you're meeting or communicating with a policymaker. You want to let them know, as I mentioned, where you're from and why you want to meet with them. You don't want to leave without making your ask. You want to make sure that you are spending the time with them, and you want them to clearly hear what you want them to do, what you want them to support, or what you want them to oppose. And you want to remember to use the hook, line, and sinker method. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So these are just some simple things that you want to remember. These are things that you would do anyway with anyone that you're meeting with. But they're just some simple things we want you to remember. So don't forget that you're visiting their office to make a request, and so you want an answer from them. You do not want to leave there without asking him or her where they stand on a specific position, or where the position is on a specific bill. Obviously, you want to be polite, you want to be honest. Courtesy is always the best policy. And most of the time, they know less about the issue than you do. Legislators Day, a legislator and or legislative staff day, they could sit in a meeting and talk about transportation. The next meeting, they're talking about education. The next meeting, they're talking about something around appropriations. And so they're listening to you, and that's what you want to remember. You want to remember that you are the expert. You are there to let them know your experience, and you're educating them on the importance of the policy issues that you're advocating for. Keep the visit short. These members and or staff are moving quickly from meeting to meeting, and so you want to make sure that you have your concise message, and that you're making it a short visit, and you're sharing your personal story, and you're making your ask quickly. You want to go ahead and go to the next slide? So speaking to a legislator in person or by phone is always the most effective way to communicate. We'll talk in a little bit about writing a letter or email, but those two ways are the most effective way to communicate to your legislator and or their office. Here are 4 basic steps when you're calling your legislator. You always want to remember to identify yourself by your name or organization. Um, Always explain where you're calling. You want to create a few talking points that focus on the content of your message. You want to ask your legislator what their position is on the issue, and of course, the things we talked about, being calm, respectful, again, knowing that you are the expert on this issue. You also want to request a written response to your phone call if you don't have the opportunity to speak directly with your member, which happens quite a bit. So make sure that at the very end of your request, you're asking them to send you something in writing on where they stand on that issue. And of course, you always want to thank the person who took the phone call for their time and their consideration. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So here's some tips on emailing your legislator. If there's a business letterhead, if possible, you want to use your letterhead. Of course, if you're a state agency, please don't use your letterhead. It's always still effective to communicate your information even as a constituent. Clearly state the reason for your email early on in your correspondence. Again, identifying the specific legislation that you're emailing them about. And again, always asking your legislator for a reply that states his or her position on the issue. Go ahead and go to the next slide. These are similar points that were mentioned previously, whether you're meeting with them face to face, if you're emailing them or making a call. Again, always being personal and polite. Again, stressing to be short and specific on a specific issue. Be neat and clear. So if you take the time to write a handwritten letter, a lot of times many members or their staff will notice that a lot more than a written letter or something that's kind of a template letter. So if you have the time to take an additional 5 to 10 minutes and actually handwrite the letter, that means a lot into that legislative office. Go into the next slide. And this is just a sample of if you are going to write a letter into your senator or representative's office, just making sure you're calling them the honorable, mentioning their name. Notice these are the addresses to write a letter to your senator and or your representative at the state capitol. The PO boxes are different and the zip codes are different, but you'll always want to address them as the honorable at the beginning, and then you can continue your letter with your senator or dear representative. Again, some things to keep in mind as you're writing your letter. You want to support your ideas with any data that is out there. Do your homework. Take the time to prepare and plan and think about what you want to write and what you want to communicate. Make it real. If you have any specific real life examples that you can share, whether it's verbally, if you're meeting with them face to face or a phone call, or you're going to do your writing, a lot of times those human examples go a long way rather than throwing a lot of statistical numbers out. Other things to kind of keep in mind: know your opposition, know what your opposition is going to say, and so if you are able to counter those and communicate that back to your legislator, please do that. Also, repetition. Make sure that you're communicating not only once or twice. Follow the process. So if you know a specific member voted a specific way in a committee, email them back and tell them, I know you voted a specific way. When this issue gets onto the House floor, I hope you will continue to support this or oppose a specific issue. So make sure you're continuing, there's that continuous communication into that office. Speak their language. If there are specific ways that they're addressing this issue, and that way they can tie it into that specific bill or that specific issue, mention that as well. Anytime you can put a positive spin, do that as well. And I can't stress enough that you want to keep it simple, you want to keep it concise, and you want to keep it persuasive.
Thanks, Claudia.
Michelle, yeah, I think that's it for my part. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, I think it's really an excellent point. Sometimes we forget to thank the legislators that do so much for us. We have several champions. Senator Jane Nelson has carried a lot of bills for us around physical activity. And, it's just as important to let your legislator know if they are supporting bills that you really appreciate their support and that you are in favor so that they know they're doing what their constituents want. So we have a few events coming up. We're really excited. The Partnership for Healthy Texas received some funding this year from Save the Children and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to help us promote some of the legislation that we reviewed today. So we are hoping that those of you who are on the call today will consider working with us and being advocates for some of this legislation. We would like you possibly this week to send an email and make one of those first initial contacts, the one of the 7 that we need to make to be sure that your legislator knows who you are, and send an email, mail a letter, or make a phone call to your legislator and just share with them that you are working on a school health advisory council in your district, or that you are a parent with children in school, and that you really are concerned about public education and public health as it relates to schools. So just a brief message, just a short email or a phone call sometime this week would be really good. Then next week, Active Life, Marissa's organization, is kicking off Healthy Texas Week um, on the April 8th at 12:30 on the Capitol South steps. So if you're available and would like to join us at the Capitol and be part of this kickoff for Healthy Texas Week, that would be great. During this week, they're also bringing in, courtesy of Catch and UT and several other organizations, on April 10th, Jared Fogle, who is the spokesperson for Subway, who lost so much weight. And he is coming in to talk about how important it is for our youth to have a healthy lifestyle and to be in a healthy environment. His feeling is he wouldn't have had to take all that weight off if he had had a coordinated school health program, more physical activity while he was in school. So we will be having an event April 10th at the Capitol at 8:30. Then on the following week, we are working with Bike Texas, as I mentioned, and they are bringing in John Poocher for, he's going to actually be at several events, but the one that the partnership's affiliated with will be a luncheon at the Capitol, talking about the built environment and the impact that our environment has on our ability to be active and to combat obesity. On April 19th, we are hoping that you've had at least one connection with your legislature. And then we're going to try to work on having a virtual advocacy day where we get everybody that we know to contact their legislators about the specific bills that we've outlined and that we're supporting. We may adjust that depending on what's going on at the legislature and see if that's a good day or if there's a better day. But right now we're looking at April 19th. And then on April 30th, we're also, again, going back with the Bike Texas people for an electric bike day at the Capitol, which is kind of a fun event for the legislators to see that, you can be mobile, and it's not going to get you a lot of physical activity, but it will get you some outdoor quality vitamin D and some air and a little bit of exercise on an electric bike. And then we will be sharing our message about the importance of physical activity along with a fun time for the legislators. So we've covered everything pretty quickly here, and there's a lot more to this than it seems. So what we're going to be sending you, along with a link to this webinar and a link to the PowerPoint so that you can go back through and refresh yourself on any of the key points, is a document that shows you how to set up an account and track legislation. We also have some helpful hints for meeting with your legislators, some reinforces some of the do's and don'ts we went over today, some talking points around obesity prevention that you can kind of weave through your communications. Sometimes the legislators ask some hard questions, so uh, our experience over the last few years have kind of given us an idea of some of the things they might ask. So we have like a cheat sheet that gives you the questions and then some possible answers that you might use. We also have some examples of asks, kind of like the ones that we talked about in the presentation today, that you can make to your legislator. and a reminder of the hook, line, and sinker approach, so that it's a fairly simple approach, but just keeping in mind the three things that you need to do while you're talking to a legislator. It kind of helps just having the little reminders. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have a link to the video. So if you'd like to replay or share the webinar with somebody else, you will be able to do that. This is the information on the three of us that have been on the webinar today. Marissa, as I mentioned, with the Active Life, Claudia with the American Cancer Society Action Network, and I'm Michelle Smith with Texas Action for Healthy Kids. I'm the state coordinator. We work with schools primarily across the state on improving nutrition and physical activity, and have specifically a lot of good information on engaging parents is one of the focuses that we've had for the last year or so. So if you're interested in more information on that, you can go to actionforhealthykids.org, and there's a lot of good information that you can find there. So with that, I would say we're in Texas, and we hope that you will go out and rope you a legislator and share some information and let them know how you feel and how important you think school health and physical activity and nutrition is to the success of children. We have a wealth of information along a lot of different topics. If you're interested in additional statistics or data to share with legislators on physical activity, on the link between physical activity and academics. So if there's anything specific that you're looking for, you can also contact us about that. And if you have any questions, I haven't seen any come up, but if you do have questions, this would be a good time to shoot them across and we'll answer them. Or if you have questions after we end the webinar, you can feel free to email me, msmith at actionforhealthykids.org. And if they're for Marissa or Claudia, I can also share them with them. So if there aren't any questions, anything we can answer at this point? I think we're good. Well, if there aren't any questions, I will remind you this has been recorded and we will send you a link. And we appreciate you listening today, and we hope that you have learned and gained some information that will help you feel more confident in dealing with the legislature about issues that you feel strongly about. Whether you agree with our positions or not, we hope that you will reach out to those legislators and share your feelings. And we hope that we have given you some tools that you'll be able to use to do that. We appreciate your time, and I will sign off for the group. And Marissa or Claudia, do you have anything else to add? I think they're muted.
Nope,
I
I'm
just
good.
want to
Just
say
happy to
thanks
be
for
a part of
everyone
it.
for
Thank you so
joining,
much.
and same here. Thanks.
Thank you both for your time today. We appreciate it. And this will conclude our webinar.